Hello, everyone, and welcome to chapter 10 of Shemuel Bet. And we talked last week about the kindness that David did for Mephibosheth, the last surviving relative of Yehonatan and Shaul. Now we're going to see David doing a chesed for the prince or the new king of Ammon, and how it backfires very badly. And we're going to ask ourselves, why? What is going on here? What is motivating David behind all of this? And, what was he thinking? What was the rationale? And trying to understand it. And we'll see this quite a few times as we get more and more into David's quote-unquote mistakes. What was he thinking? Here, why would you do chesed, kindness, for an enemy? Why would you do a census of the Jewish people when you know you're not allowed to count the Jews? That's at the end of Shemuel Bet. Or what was he thinking with Bathsheba, which obviously is going to be a question we're going to have for a few chapters as we go through. There's a lot of questions here of what were you thinking? How did you think this was going to end up? But here, we're going to start with probably the easiest of them, because it's the least consequential, which is Bnei Ammon are historically an enemy of the Jewish people. So what is behind David's motivation to show kindness to the new king? So this is what we're going to talk about, and let's get into the text, and then I'll develop this a bit more. And the text begins with my favorite word, as you all know by now, Vayhi, and it was. Vayhi achariken, and it was after all of that. And we know that Vayhi is going to introduce something bad is going to happen. Vayamot melech b'nei Ammon, the king of the children of Ammon, died. Vayimloch Chanun beno tachtav, and his son Chanun ruled in his place. Bet Vayomer David, and David said, chesed im Chanun ben Nachash, I shall do kindness with Chanun, the son of Nachash. Remember, Nachash means snake. Kasher asa aviv imadi chesed, just like his father did chesed, did kindness with me. Vayishlach David lenachamo biyad avadav el aviv, vayavo'u avdei David eretz b'nei Ammon. And David sent to comfort him through his servants for his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. Before you get into any commentary, what do we know? We know that Nachash, the king of Ammon, was the person who came and threatened and attacked Yavesh Gilad all the way in Shmuel Aleph, I think it was chapter 11, and said, I give you 7 days before I'm going to wipe you all out. And it was there that a young Shaul came and made a name for himself. So what on earth are we doing negotiating with Nachash? Not negotiating, wanting to go and do chesed for him. What is happening here? On top of that, I'm now going to share with you the commentaries. The commentaries begin with, know your chumash. What does it say in Sefer Devarim? Lo tidrosh shlamam v'tovatam kol yamecha le'olam. You shall never seek out their welfare or their good all your days. Says the Midrash, Bamidbar Rabbah, don't seek out their welfare or their good. Why? Look what happened to David. He tried to treat them with kindness and compassion, and in the end, he was embarrassed and forced to fight a bloody war. Now, what's the kindness that the king of Ammon did? Rashi fills us in by quoting a Midrash, and all the commentaries quote this Midrash. What was the kindness? When David was fleeing from Shaul, all the way back in Shmuel Aleph, his father, mother, and brothers came to him, and he brought them before the king of Moab. And he said to him, please allow my father and my mother to live with you. Nevertheless, he killed them all, except one of them, and he fled and escaped to the land of Ammon. And Nachash did not do anything to him. Nachash did not kill him. He did not hand him over to the Moabites. He allowed them to live. What was Nachash's motivation? Nachash said, I hate Shaul. Shaul is my enemy. Shaul's enemy is David. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so therefore, there was a pact, a surprising pact between Nachash, the king of Ammon, who was until this point an enemy of the Jewish people because of what he did to Yavesh Gilad. But once Moab, who David's family were from through Ruth, his grandmother, once they had taken and killed David's parents and other brothers, once David's remaining brother runs away to Nachash of Bnei Ammon, suddenly there is a relationship there. There is a chesed. And so David says to him, I know what it says in Torah. I know he's a snake, but I owe him. I need to show him chesed. Right or wrong? Wrong. Right or wrong? Wrong. It's a very interesting thing here, right or wrong. No, it's no right or wrong here. Torah says it black and white. Don't seek out their goodness. Do not seek out their peace. When you are making treaties, don't forget, always trust in Hashem. When you're looking to do chesed, always trust in Hashem. Don't start thinking you know it better. This whole story, this whole episode that we're reading in chapter 10 is what? David put his trust in man rather than putting his trust in Hashem. Same thing. David should never have had his parents and his brothers with Moab. Hadn't been with Moab, Shaul, would he have killed them? We hope not. You never know. We hope not. But certainly trust him as a Jew over these non-Jewish historical enemies. Continuing, Pasuk Gimel says, Vayomeru sarei b'nei Ammon el Chanun adonehem, and the princes or the officers of Ammon said to Chanun their lord, Hamechabed David et avicha beinecha? Ki shalach lecha menachamim? Do you think that David honors your father, that he sent you comforters? Is that what you think? Halo ba'avo chakor et ha'ir u'ragla u'l'hovcha shalach David et avadav elecha? Is it not in order to investigate the city and spy it out and to search it that David has sent his servants to you? Oh, come on, Hanun, don't be so naive. Were you born yesterday? He's come to send Nechama? Come on. Yes, that's the reason he sent Nechama. But really, they're here to spy out the land. What are you doing? Now, what was their rationale? Why were they so suspicious? Says Rashi, Hanun's advisors said to him, their Torah warns them, do not seek their peace. And he seeks your peace? What's he saying? You know what? Our enemies, they know our Torah better than we do. They know that verse. Doesn't mean they knew the entire Torah. They know the verses about them. They know what it says. And therefore, what are you doing? Remember the Torah. David's never going to go against the words of the Torah. And it's a fundamental lesson that our enemies often know something that we don't know. And what is that? If we would just keep the Torah, again, not such an easy thing to do always, but if we would keep the Torah, Hashem would keep us. But we don't. We don't figure that out. And David HaMelech made a mistake. And look what happens to his messengers. Daled and Hey. Vayikach Hanun et Avdei David, Vaygalach et Chatzi Zekanam, Vayichrot et Madvehem Bachetzi, Ad Shtotehem Vayshalechem. And Hanun took David's servants and he shaved off half of their beards and he cut off their garments in half up to their buttocks and he sent them away. Okay, I just went with that translation. Okay, half beards. You can see the derrieres. This is a bad, very embarrassing move for these distinguished ambassadors. Let's have a look at the commentary of why we had this strange and severe punishment. Says the Ralbag, Gersonides, this caused them severe embarrassment. Why? Because the ambassadors couldn't simply shave the other half of their beards, because Jewish men in those days all had beards. This punishment was therefore meant to endure for a long time. What was going on here? By cutting off half your beard, it's not one of those, oh no, Rabbi, you cut your beard too short, you're just going to have to cut it all off. I could do that. I do that sometimes when my when the thing comes off. But they couldn't do that. Today, men, you can do anything you want. You got all your options. Here, by cutting off half of their beard, they're making them have to grow it fully. Okay, so this was very embarrassing. Now, Hanun's father wanted to gouge out everyone's right eyes, much worse than half a beard. That's true, remember that. He absolutely wanted to do that. So why is it the half measure? So Abravanel answers this question. On the one hand, Hanun believed the ambassadors were coming to pay their respects at the death of his father. On the other hand, he also believed his advisors that they could be coming to spy out the land. So instead of executing them as spies, he treated them as if they had both good and evil intentions. And therefore, he gave them a half punishment, which kind of speaks to Rob's comment there. If he thought that they were truly guilty, he would have gouged their eyes out. He would have killed them. He would have tortured them. By doing this gross embarrassment, he's saying, could be that there's mixed messages here. And so therefore, I'm going to give them this mixed punishment. What he didn't realize perhaps was, he knew what in the Torah about what our action is to Bnei Ammon, not to do their good or their kindness, but he maybe didn't know that for the Jews, they could get new clothes, that would be fine, but he didn't know that they wouldn't be clean shaven. Okay, now, David sends them, we can see this in Pasuk Hey, Vayagidu leDavid, and David is told, Vayishlach likratam, ki hayu ha'anashim nichlamim me'od. And he sent to meet them, for the men were very much ashamed. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said, Shuvu b'Yericho, stay in Yericho. Ad yitzamach zekanchem v'shavtem, until your beards grow, and then you'll be able to return. Okay, what's here? What's going on here? Why this description for us? The Ma'am Loez tells us, from here we learn the great concern David had for the dignity of his fellow man. Even though the return of these messengers was a vital matter of state, David ordered them to delay until their beards grew back. He had them stay in Yericho, which was a small town on the border of Ammon, far from the crowds of the palace. It's telling us an important lesson here, that the needs of state were secondary to the concern of their emotional welfare. They had been terribly embarrassed. Perhaps David felt a measure of responsibility for this, and so therefore, benachat, stay in Yericho, and come back in a few months when your beards have had turns to grow back a little bit. Now we shall continue the verses and see the response. Pasuk Vav. Vayu b'nei Ammon ki nivashu b'David. And b'nei Ammon saw they become odious to David. Vayishlechu b'nei Ammon vayiskeru et Aram bet Rechov bet Aram Tzova 20,000 ragli bet Melech Ma'acha 1,000 ish ve'ish tov 12,000 ish. And b'nei Ammon, once they saw that they were odious to David, they sent and hired Aram of Bet Rechov and Aram of Tzova, 20,000 soldiers, and the king of Ma'acha, 1,000 men, and of Ishtov, 12,000 men. Now, if I could show you this on the map, I'd love to show you this. Basically, this is northern Jordan and all of Syria, okay? This is where these three kings are, okay? Aram Tzova and Aram Rechov and Ma'acha. This is all basically Syria, and Ammon is Jordan. Okay, you've got here this whole eastern flank. Okay, so think of your modern map of Israel, and you've got Syria in the northeast, and you've got Jordan on the east. This is where we're talking about. This is where this is holding. Okay, so he's got like a confederacy here of the eastern side. Zion. Vayishma David, and David heard that they were mustering an army. Vayishlach et Yoav, and he sent Yoav, but kol hatzava hagiborim, and he sends them out, all the mighty men of all the mighty warriors. Now here the question is, David heard, but David's not going. Why is David not going? Why is he sending his general? Okay, let's go and understand that one. Says the Mamloes, David sent Yoav because he did not want to give Hanun the opportunity to boast that he had gone out to war against the king of Israel. That's what Mamloes says. I'd like to suggest perhaps David feels a little bit responsible for this and saying, you know what? If I get involved here, it looks like it's a personal vendetta. And so therefore, I'm sending out my general to do it for me. This is a matter of state. This is a low-level army. I don't need to go fight this battle. I'm leaving it all to Yoav. Then, the Navi continues, Vayetzu b'nei Ammon, vaya'archu milchama petach hashar, va'aram tzova urchov ve'ish tov, Uma'acha levadam basadeh. And Bnei Ammon came out, and they prepared the battle at the entrance to the gate. But Aram Tzova and Rechov and Ishtov and Ma'acha, the four people who were helping him, they were by themselves in the field. What's happening here? Bnei Ammon, right by the palace. Everyone else in the field. What's the motivation here? Again, let's have a look at the commentary. Jump down to 10:8. Mamloes explains, Hanun's intent was to trap Yoav's troops between the two forces and attack them from both sides like a pincer movement. Alternatively, Ammon were not a strong fighting force, so they put themselves near the city so they could run for cover. Also, they didn't know for sure if the mercenaries would turn on them. And so therefore, where did he have the mercenaries? Out in the field. So Bnei Ammon, you know what? Weaklings. They're in the palace. They're coming. We'll just easily run. And guess what? Our friendly soldiers who are coming to help us, they're hired help. They may turn on us. And so therefore, we'll keep them in the field. Alternatively, he split them so that he can close in on the Jewish forces. Okay, you take it as you wish. I quite like the thought of them being weaklings who don't even trust their own mercenaries. Vayar Yoav. Yoav saw ki hayta elav penei hamilchama mipanim u'me'achor. He saw the battlefront was before and behind him. So he could see that they'd split their forces. Vayivchar mikol bechorei Yisrael, vayaroch likrat Aram. So he chose all the choice men of Israel, and he sent them against Aram. Ve'yeter ha'am, but the rest of the people, the weaker force, Natan biyad Avishai, he gave them into the hand of his brother Avshai, Achiv. Vayaroch likrat b'nei Ammon, and he had them set them up against b'nei Ammon. So what's happening here? Says our notes on this. Mamloes, why does Yoav divide his forces? The stronger soldiers with Yoav to fight the stronger mercenaries, and the regular soldiers to fight the weaker Ammonites. That's why he divided them up. And so therefore he's not going to get closed in by a pincer movement. Okay. Pasuk Yud Aleph and Yud Bet. Vayomer, in techezak Aram mimeni, v'hayita li lishua, v'im b'nei Ammon yechezku mimcha, v'halachti lohoshia lach. And he said, if the Arameans will be too strong for me, then you help me. And if Bnei Ammon will be too strong for you, then I will go to your aid. Make a pact. Chazak v'nit chazak. Be strong and let us strengthen ourselves. Ba'ad amenu, on behalf of our people. Uv'ad arei Eloheinu, and on behalf of the cities of our God. V'Adonai yaseh hatov be'einav. And may God do what is good in his eyes. There seems to be a small concern on the part of Yoav, which is we need to strengthen ourselves that what? We might not win this battle. Why is Yoav concerned they may not win this battle? Why is there such a feeling of strong and take heart? The Ralbag says, we can learn something really good from Yoav's instructions to Avishai, that we cannot rely on open miracles. Rather, we must do our own efforts first to save ourselves and do all that is in our own power to do, and then help Hashem, and then Hashem will help them to be victorious. What is the Ralbag saying? Ein somchin al hanes. We don't rely on miracles. Also, hishtadlut and bitachon. What is emunah? Emunah requires, faith requires hishtadlut. We do our own work, and then bitachon, and then we rely on Hashem for help. But not, we don't have to prepare our battle plan. Now on this thing, why is Yoav so concerned? Why was he unsure? Says Mamloez, because David's infraction, by David breaking a mitzvah in the Torah, by showing concern for the Ammonites, that's what brought this whole war against the Jewish people. And he said, perhaps Hashem would not be with them like he had been with David when he was doing the will of God. Perhaps things aren't going to work out well for us. And so therefore, that is the extra concern that he had. Perhaps this isn't going to work out well. Now, the commentaries disagree on this. Did David break a mitzvah in the Torah? Did he break a prohibition there by sending messengers? Or was it just he shouldn't have done it, but it wasn't being a prohibition? But Yoav clearly, according to this way the Mamloez interprets it, is David really put his soldiers in jeopardy. He was fighting a huge force because David had acted wrong. Thank God, as we're going to see in these psukim, it worked out well. But it could have been a punishment. God did not see it that way, and that's why it doesn't seem that David did anything wrong. He just maybe shouldn't have done it. So see here, Yud Gimel. Vayigash Yoav v'ha'am asher imo lemilchama ba'aram vayanusu mipanav. And Yoav and the people that were with him drew forward to do battle against the Arameans, and they ran away. Ubnei Ammon ra'u ki nasaram. And when the Bnei Ammon saw that the Arameans had fled, vayanusu mipenei Avishai, that they fled before Avishai, that they came to the city, vayavo ha'ir. They ran to the city, Vayashov Yoav me'al penei Ammon, vayavor b'Yushalayim. And Yoav, seeing that all this had come about, they came, they left. There was no battle to be had. Everyone knew there was no need to conquer and subdue them because they'd already been subdued, which is, what was the power of Bnei Ammon? Was the fact that they could have a united confederacy of all these mercenaries, all these Syrians from Aram Sova and Aram Rechov and Ma'acha. But once they had run away, no one to fight anymore. This is easy. And so therefore, Yoav said, I'm not even going to give them the satisfaction of beating them. They've run away. I'll go back to Yerushalayim. Easy.
I have a question for you, Rabbi Hassan.
Yes, Rob.
Do you think this phrase, be strong and resolute, you know, we've heard this before. I'm thinking back to the book of Joshua.
Exactly, Yehoshua, and also right at the end of Devarim, Moshe telling him, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and courageous.
Right, and in this sentence that Yoav speaks, it's the only speech in the entire chapter. He combines the phrase "be strong and resolute" with the words "cities of our God" or the towns of our God, which I think is a more direct reference to the book of Joshua. You know, because there's many chapters and many passages about all the cities that were conquered and then assigned to each of the tribes. Do you think that he's trying to give some kind of rallying cry to the soldiers to remind them of the glory days of the past, you know, many generations ago when the land was first conquered?
Absolutely. This chazak v'nit chazek comment, if it said chazak v'amatz, I would be totally at one with you, and I'm almost at one with you. But the chazak v'nit chazek language it's not chazak ve'amatz. It's strengthen yourself and let us strengthen each other, which is, even if we think that we're fighting a cause which is not necessary, we might have thought, why have we done this? Why are we in this position? Because David's diplomacy backfired. And so Yoav has to come out and give a language which is going to resonate, which is, let us strengthen ourselves. Let us not involve ourselves in matters of state to say, should we be having this battle or not? Rather, let us know that we will defend each other. And so therefore, together we'll battle. Now, is it harking back to Yoshua? Yes and no. Yes, because it uses chazak, and no, because it doesn't say be'ematz. I think it's chazak ve'chazek, which is we are going to support each other internally, and we can battle it through. And when the battle is won, perhaps there can be a discussion about David's diplomacy with historical enemies. And I think there's a little bit of both in there. But Rob, I do like that you're paying attention to that language and being sensitive to it. Continuing, so they've now run away and they've come back to Yerushalayim. 15. Vayar Aram ki nigaf lifnei Yisrael vayasvu yachad. And the Arameans saw that they were smitten before Israel, and they gathered themselves together. Vayishlach Hadadezer vayotze et Aram asher me'ever hanahar vayavo chelam v'shovach sar tzeva Hadadezer lifneihem. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Arameans that were from beyond the river, and they came to Chelam, and Shovach, the captain of the host of Hadadezer, before them. Vayigad David, and David was told, Vayesof et kol Yisrael, and he gathered all of Israel. Vayavor et Hayarden, and they passed over the Jordan. Vayavo Chelama, and they came to Chelam. Vayarchu, and they arranged themselves against Aram. Vayarchu Aram likrat David. The Aram arranged themselves against David. Vayalachamu imo, and they fought against him. Vayanos Aram mipnei Yisrael, and Aram fled from before Yisrael. Vayaharog David me'Aram, and David killed from Aram Sheva Ma'ot, Recheb, 700 chariots, Va'arba'im elef parashim, and 40,000 horsemen, Vet Shovach, Sar Tzvaor, Hika, Vayamot Sham. And Shovach, the captain of his host, he smote, and he died there. Vayiru chol hamelachim, avdei Hadadezer, ki nigefu lifnei Yisrael, vayashlimu et Yisrael, vayavdum, vayiu Aram lahoshia od et bnei Ammon. And all the kings, the servants of Hadadezer, saw that they were smitten before Israel, and they made peace with Israel and served them. And the Arameans feared to aid Bnei Ammon ever again. They never would go and save them again. Now, I highlighted in red the numbers here: 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen. Now, if we go and have a look and cross-reference this story in Divrei Hayamim, in Chronicles 1, which is written by Ezra several hundred years later, it says, Vayanos Aram milifnei Yisrael. So same thing, the Arameans fled from before Yisrael. Vayarok David me'aram, and David killed from Aram, Shivat alafim rechev, 7,000 chariots, V'arba'im elef ish ragli, and 40,000 foot soldiers. Et Shafach, Sar Hatzavah Hemit, and they put to death Shafach, the general. So, which is it? Is it 700 or is it 7,000? Is it 40,000 footmen or is it 40,000 horsemen? There are three ways to understand this. The Radak, there were two types of chariots. Shemuel Bet only mentions those who manned the super chariots, while in Divrei Hayamim, it includes both types of chariots. The Ma'am Loez gives a different answer. Each unit of 10 chariots had its own leader. There were 700 captains for the 7,000 charioteers. Once David defeated them, the rest were forced to fight on foot. The Abar Banel, perhaps 40,000 men were killed, were both horsemen and foot soldiers, which is kind of like they were horsemen to begin with, and when the chariots were defeated, they ran off the horses, and then they were footmen, and then they were killed. And so therefore, ways of understanding the difference in the text, one way you could answer is, Divrei Hayamim is not as accurate as Shemuel Bet. That's one way to answer it. But if I want to say they're both written Baruch HaKodesh, with divine intervention, with divine inspiration, then I want to say that there isn't a contradiction. It's 700 leading chariots, but there were 7,000 total chariots. Or there were 700 chariots of 10. So it's 700 times 10 to 7,000. And the horsemen became footmen rather than these details are wrong. And so therefore, we end this chapter, and I'll take Rabisa's comment in a second. We end this chapter here with, again, David made a mistake, but it didn't cause him major challenge. He's victorious, and he wins. And so therefore, it leads us in for next week, for chapter 11, for when we're going to get into the real stories of Shemuel Bet, which is David and Bathsheba. Rabisa, go for it.
I was just wondering, when it talks about Rechev here, is it describing the chariot drivers or the sus, the horse, like in Shirat Hayam, where they're noted separately? Is the horse part of the numbers or irrelevant here?
Correct, and that's interesting there, that and I didn't bring that the commentaries bring that comment there, that there's different, the Rechev and sus Rechev Paro is a different ways of describing whether it's chariot or different type of chariot, or is it number of people in each chariot. So all that is in there too. All right, so that's technical ways of understanding the text. This is a little bit of a preamble to our real chapter, which is next week, when we're going to jump in full speed into the question. And don't worry, I will try and address all those questions about how could he, and what was he thinking, and did he really do what it says, and how do we think that David is the greatest if this is what he did. We're going to try and address all of that, at least try to start a discussion on that. So looking forward to seeing you then. Have a wonderful